الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So today we have the Nabi of Allah, Ismail alayhi salam, the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Ismail alayhi salam is also mentioned quite a few times in the Quran. Anybody want to guess how many? 18 times. 18 times he's mentioned by name, which is a lot, given that we don't have, a lot has not been mentioned about him in the Quran, but his name is something that has come up at least 18 times. You know that for us, for anyone other than the prophets of Allah, for example, Zayd, the one companion, the only one whose name is mentioned in the Quran, one time is, so much. So for someone to be mentioned 18 times, this is something that is important. So Ismail, as we mentioned yesterday in the ending of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that when he left his family, a tribe called Jurhum came and settled in Mecca. And Ismail alayhi salam, he grew up with Jurhum and he learned the Arabic language from them. And as he grew up, he married the woman. Of course, there are, it's him and his mother. So he marries into Jurhum, and he marries he has wives from them. He has children, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something about Ismail alayhi salam that وَكَادَ يَأْمُرُ أَهْلَهُ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ, that he used to order his wife, his family, he used to order his family to pray and give zakah. So this is the role of a father. Now the word order should not be understood as like a dictator giving a command under the threat of punishment, but just like we say, يَأْمُرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. يَأْمُرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, meaning commanding good, means to encourage the good. And that is something that if you have the authority to do so, you make that the law. If you have the power to make the rules of the house, you make the rules of the house around those things which are good. And you try to stop those things which are bad. If you don't have the power to do so, to make the rules, then you basically have to convince, cajole, persuade, influence, whatever you have to do in order to get them. But this is your job to try to encourage and facilitate good for the people. So he used to do this with his family, that he would remind them about salah and zakah. So at home, parents, especially, so when we say that the father is the head of the household, it is not necessarily a privilege. It is a responsibility, meaning the buck stops with you. That if there's something wrong happening in the house and the father knows about it, didn't do anything about it, then that father has to answer in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Me and my wife, we have this argument about who has the right to name a child. When you have a child, you know how many women, people, they want to have like nice, beautiful, rhyming names. They will look up a word from the Quran and stuff like that. So I tell her that, okay, you can find all the names that you want. Give me a short list of them. I will pick the final one. She says, but I'm giving birth, so it should be my role. I tell him, no, because in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have to answer. Because this is the case where a young man came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and he complained to Umar ibn al-Khattab. He said that, isn't it the right of the child that his father give him a good name? And Umar radiallahu anh said, yes, it is the right of the child that the father give him a good name. Let's see how long this lasts. So, my humble understanding is that it is the father's responsibility that after you get all the suggestions, all the names, you choose the best one, but the final responsibility, if you choose the wrong name, if you choose a name which has an inappropriate meaning, or you choose a name that sometimes people don't think about, like, there are some names that are good names in Arabic, but when you name that child in that name, and that child goes to school, then that child gets opened up to being made fun of, because it may have a different type of pronunciation in English that has the same name in English has a different meaning to it. So these are things that you have to think about. Also, our cultures, we have a problem of shortening the name to that which sounds cute. But then there are some names which it's not appropriate for you to shorten. So if you name a child Abdul Rahman, you must call him Abdul Rahman. Or you have to give him a different nickname, but you cannot call him Rahman. You cannot call him Rahman because this name is exclusively for Allah. Same thing, Abdul Mannan. Al-Mannan is a name of Allah. It is appropriate for Allah. It is not appropriate for the people. So you cannot call him Mannan. So in cultures, if his name is Abdul Rahim, they call him Rahim Bhai. Please come on, right? But some names of Allah, it's okay. You can say Rahim, but you cannot be Rahman. So these are all different considerations that a father is responsible for in the front of Allah. Yes, brother? Yes. Abdul Aziz, yeah. Azuz. So, can a person be Aziz? Yes. Al-Aziz, no. So I'll tell you that, my son's name is Abdul Rahman. So his nickname is Ramen, which is like ramen noodles, okay? But it is different from Ar-Rahman. I think that Azuz is fine, but, ask another sheikh if need be to. No, Rahman, even without Al, is not appropriate for anyone, because Rahman means the owner of mercy. So it's not appropriate even without the Al. Some names are okay without Al, some names are not okay even without the Al, okay? So another one, I'll give you an example. Al-Mutakabbir is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if you call a man, you're so mutakabbir, you're like, no, that's an insult to that person. So these are things that need to be looked at. Now, unfortunately, sometimes people look at TV dramas that are famous, and they pick out names from there. So all of these are different issues. Anyways, going back, that the father has a responsibility to make sure about these type of things in the house. So he continues to live in Al-Hijaz, and he serves the pilgrims when they come. Now remember, who are the pilgrims that are coming? The call that Ibrahim alayhi salam made, people have started coming, and they have started to make Hajj and Umrah towards the Kaaba. Now, one day Ibrahim alayhi salam went to visit Ismail, and Ismail alayhi salam was not at home. He asked Ismail's wife, so she doesn't know that this old man is the father of my husband. She's never met him. There are no pictures, and you don't have ID cards. You don't really have, it's a different system. And it used to be very common. Back in the days, I would say even like 30, 40 years ago, it was common that somebody could just knock on your door and come in and then spend the night in your house, right? Relatives used to just come over and spend the whole night, spend 3-4 days in the house. Nowadays, it's like you don't do that type of stuff anymore. So you would meet somebody in the street and you would bring him home for a meal. All of those things used to happen, now they don't happen. But this is going back thousands of years. So there's an old man at the door, and he says, "Is your husband home?" She says, "No, he's not home." He says, "Okay, no problem. How is your life? How are things going?" So she says that life is so hard, it's full of misery, so many problems, just complaining. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he leaves a voicemail. He says to her, he says that when your husband come home, tell him to change the threshold of his gate. Change the, what is it, Urdu? Chokat. go stand up there. Finish this soon. ये भी die होगा. Third try, let's see. Third mic. So he leaves this message with her and he leaves, doesn't say anything else. Ismail alayhi salam comes back and asked if someone had visited. Now, how does Ismail alayhi salam know if someone had visited? Perhaps he is a Nabi of Allah. He has intuition and maybe he can sense that there's some, sometimes you can kind of tell that, okay, something happened. What happened? Tell me. So he says, did anybody come over? The wife said, yes, there was a man, and he conveyed a message, and he said that change the threshold of your gate, change the doorstep or whatever you want to call it. So Ismail alayhi salam said, that was my father, and he ordered me to divorce you. So you are divorced. Now, let's pause the story. We're going to come back. We're going to unpack this a little bit. Ismail alayhi salam then divorces this woman and he marries another. And some time passes and Ibrahim alayhi salam comes back again to visit Ismail. And he asked if he's home, and she said, no, he's not home. So he said, how's your life? So the wife told him that Alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah. We are happy, we are blessed, everything we can ask for. Now, they're still living in the same living standard. Okay, they are nothing different, but the mindset is different. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy. So he said, what do you eat? She said, we eat meat. What do you drink? She said, we drink water. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, oh Allah, bless their meat and water. Oh Allah, bless their meat and water. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he leaves a message this time, and he says to keep firm the doorstep, keep firm the threshold of your gate. Ismail alayhi salam comes back, asked if someone had visited. Perhaps it wasn't necessarily that he felt something was there, but it was normal that people would visit and you would say, okay, did anybody come to visit me for any needs? So the wife said, yes, a good-looking old man came and he conveyed this message. So Ismail alayhi salam said, it was my father and you are the threshold. So he says that it was my father and you are the threshold that he ordered me to keep with you, keep you with me. So this is a hadith which is narrated, mentioned by Ibn Abbas. So now the question comes, is that in our time, in our situation, can a father tell his son to change your doorstep or keep your doorstep? The keep, definitely no problem. Nobody has a problem with that, right? But can a father tell his son, change your doorstep? What do you think? He can suggest, okay. Can a father tell his son to divorce his wife? So that's a very important distinction, right? This is not just any father. This is Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is Khalilullah. And now notice that although he is Khalilullah, although his knowledge and wisdom is unmatched for anyone else except the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but look at how subtle his message is. That he's not trying to, if the husband, meaning Ismail alayhi salam, does not decide to act upon it or does not want to explain to her, she would never even know what the father has advised. It's a coded message that they understand in the most subtle of ways, that he's basically giving him advice. He's giving him advice. So this is the most that the parents have in terms of role, because your children, they are not your children once they're adult. It is not your responsibility, it is their responsibility. You can advise them, you can warn them, but in the most subtle of ways. What meaning? Not direct, like, okay, your wife is a bad woman, you need to divorce her. But look at the words of that Ibrahim alayhi salam chooses that change your doorstep. Now, if he is wise enough to understand this, he's wise enough to understand why it needs to be done. And if he's not wise enough to understand this, then there's no benefit in telling him that in the first place. And of course, this goes back to the upbringing in the first place. This goes back to the upbringing in the first place, where they have enough of a communication and trust that he understands that if he is telling me, for many people, they say, look, my father would never say such a thing. If he says it, then it must mean it's something really big, right? So meaning you have to, if someone, it's unfortunate, it's a very common case where a lot of moms, especially moms, they feel like the way I raised my son, his wife is not taking care of him as good as I'm taking care of him. Paratha jalawa hota hai, right? That he has to wake up so early and drop the kids to school while she's sleeping. When she's making bread, the bread is burnt, and the food is not good quality. All of these type of things this is a very natural thing, because it's like if you ever driving and another driver sits on the front seat with you, what happens? Well, how do you feel? You're like, man, this guy doesn't know how to drive. He's going to crash here, he's going to crash there. So that's exactly, I think that it could be called separation anxiety, or loss of control, all sorts of psychological issues going on. It's not real, it's a lot of times it's perception. But parents really, really need to, we recommend, as you know, that last year we had a training with Dr. Muhammad Nisarullah, and he says that if it's your first child getting married, the parents need premarital counseling, because parents don't know what are healthy boundaries and what are unhealthy interruptions and interference in marriage. So parents need that guidance as well, that, okay, when is the right time and what's the right way to give advice if the child is, if that's not a child, if the grown-up adult who was their child is perhaps not happy or not having a good marital life, what's the right way to give that advice? So we learned this from the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that yes, it is the role of the parents that if they see a problem, they should give advice, but it should be advice and it should not be a direct threat or psychological torture that happens, which is that sometimes mother-in-laws or father-in-laws, they will tell their in-law, daughter or son, that, I'm going to tell my son to throw you out of this house, or things like that. This is not appropriate, this is not acceptable, and this is not Islamic behavior. This is not Islamic behavior. If there's a problem like this happening, so let's say, of course, this would never happen with the prophets of Allah, but let's say if we were to change the people, that the father was being overreaching, and he doesn't like, or the mom doesn't like the wife, and she is now trying to get this marriage to break up. So the husband doesn't feel like the wife is wrong, or she's not fulfilling her role as a good wife. So if there's bad blood between the two, then whose role is it to strike the balance? What do you think? The husband, right? The husband has to give mom what is due to mom and give the wife what is due to wife. And he needs to, if he doesn't know, he needs to get educated that what are the rights of my mother on me, what are the rights of my wife on me, and what are the rights of my sisters on me, what are the rights of my father on me, and fulfill everybody's rights without taking away from anyone's. And of course, the expectation that you have from your child when your child is a child cannot be the same from your child when that child is now grown up, they're married, they have a wife, right? So, for example, my kids are young. It's okay for me to expect that they spend 4 hours with me every night. Okay, we do homework together, we eat together, we may even sleep together in the same room at times. Now, if my kids are old enough, is that reasonable? No. So if I'm asking for that, then I am the one that's overreaching. So these are things that Islam teaches us, that وَآتِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ. Give each one their due rights. You cannot take from anyone. We have to give everyone their due rights and understand that in different stages, your rights are different with different people. You know, even for example, a daughter, she has duties towards her parents. But when she's married, her duties to her parents are not the same as they were before she was married, because now she has another role placed on her as well. So when we expect from people more than what is Islamically expected, then we are being oppressive. That is asking too much. And that becomes abuse, and that becomes nasty and difficult for everyone. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the tawfiq to be from among those who fulfill the rights of all those that are in our lives. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Yeah. So this is a question which is about divorce, and inshallah, as soon as we cover our fiqh of salah in our fiqh class, we're going to switch over to the fiqh of marriage and divorce. So one key point there is that a husband is not allowed to kick his wife out even after he divorces her. For their waiting period, she's supposed to live in the same house, and she's supposed to be given a safe and respectable, dignified space and time to live out her iddah during that time. So unfortunately, a lot of the people, they're not doing divorce in the right way in the first place, let alone what happens after divorce to do it in the right way. But inshallah, we'll discuss that in more details in our fiqh class after our salah series.